The sun was already high up when the little village of Umuike began to wake up. Women were busy sweeping their yards. Children ran around barefoot, laughing and chasing one another. The men were getting ready to head out to their farms. But there was one house in the village that stayed completely silent. It sat at the very end of the village, right next to the thick bushes. The roof was ancient and the walls looked worn out, yet the house still stood firm. That was where an old woman named Mama Zik lived. Everyone in town stayed away from her. People didn't even say hello. Parents warned their kids never to go near her gate. Even the local goats and chickens seemed to know to stay away from her yard. Mama Zik was a widow with no children of her own. Many years ago, her husband vanished in a very creepy way. One evening, the neighbors saw him sitting outside, munching on some roasted corn. By the next morning, he was just gone. There were no footprints left behind and no note. He simply disappeared. There was no sign of where he went. Whenever the neighbors asked Mama Zik about her husband, she always gave the same answer. He left the house very early that morning without saying a word. Most people in the village didn't believe her. They whispered behind her back, "How can a man just vanish like that?" Something about her story felt wrong. Still, everyone was too afraid to ask her more questions. The villagers didn't know it, but Mama Zik was hiding a scary secret. Even though she was 80 years old, she didn't feel weak or tired like other seniors. Deep down, she knew the truth. Long ago, she had sacrificed her husband in a secret meeting with a hidden group of women to get her strength back. Nobody in the village had any idea. To everyone else, Mama Zik was just a strange old widow whose husband disappeared without a trace. Years went by, and she lived all alone in that quiet house. Every morning, people watched her walk slowly with a small basket. She went to the market by herself, bought what she needed, and went straight home. Nobody followed her, and nobody dared to talk to her. The villagers always wondered about the same things. Where does she get her money? Who is taking care of her? What does she even eat? They never got any answers. Sometimes, when Mama Zik felt too tired to carry something heavy, she would call out to someone passing by. "My child, please help me with this basket," she would say. But as soon as people heard her voice, they would speed up. Some people even ran away. Children would scream and race back to their houses, crying, "She called me. Mama Zik called me." Her yard stayed empty, and she remained alone. No one ever visited her. Even during the big village festivals, when everyone was going house to celebrate, nobody ever stepped into her yard. The silence and loneliness around her house felt like a heavy, thick wall. But one afternoon, something different happened. A young lady was walking slowly down the dusty road that linked Umuike to the next village, Umuike. Her name was Olaedo. Olaedo was very beautiful. Her skin glowed like palm oil under the hot sun. She had bright, kind eyes and always carried herself with dignity. People from all the nearby villages knew her because she was so well behaved. That day, Olaedo was balancing a large tray on her head. It was filled with all sorts of things to sell. Tasty dried fish. Fresh red peppers. Bags of beans. Small packs of gari. She was hawking her goods, moving from one village to the next. Fresh pepper. Good gari. Dried fish, she called out. Her voice was soft but very clear as she walked along. Olaedo had never been to Umuike before. As she traveled down the quiet road, she noticed something odd. One house stood all by itself at the very edge of the village. It looked ancient, but she could tell someone lived there. Before she could even think about it, a door suddenly swung open. Mama Zik stepped outside. Her eyes went wide with shock. It had been months since anyone had even walked near her house. But now, right there in front of her gate, stood a young lady. Mama Zik didn't hesitate. She quickly started walking toward the gate to meet her. "My daughter," she called out. Olaedo heard the voice and slowly turned around. She saw an old woman standing by the gate, waving at her. Just as she started to walk toward her, something strange happened. Suddenly, Olaedo heard another voice. "Hey, stop." It came from the other side of the road. Olaedo looked over quickly and saw a young lady standing behind a mango tree. The girl was shaking her head fast. She raised her hand and started waving it back and forth, looking very serious. She was clearly signaling for Olaedo to stay away from the old woman. Olaedo was confused for a moment. She looked at the old woman, then back at the girl behind the tree. The girl kept shaking her head. "Don't go there," she whispered loudly. Olaedo didn't understand why. To her, the old woman just looked tired. Olaedo gave a small smile, adjusted the tray on her head, and started walking toward the gate anyway. The girl behind the tree covered her face in shock. Mama Zik was surprised too. It had been forever since someone actually chose to walk toward her. When Olaedo reached the gate, she gently set her heavy tray down on the ground. "Good afternoon, Mama," she said politely. Mama Zik blinked slowly. For a few seconds, she was speechless. Nobody had spoken to her with such respect in years. "Good afternoon, my daughter," she finally replied, her voice sounding much softer than usual. "Are you from this village?" the old woman asked. Olaedo shook her head. "No, Mama, I'm from Amapu village. I'm here to sell food." Mama Zik looked into the tray at the dried fish, gari, pepper, and beans. Without even thinking twice, she started buying everything. She bought the pepper, the gari, the beans, and even the fish. Olaedo carefully wrapped each item and handed them over. After paying, Mama Zik stared at Olaedo for a long time. "My daughter," she said slowly, "can you help me buy some things from the market tomorrow?" Olaedo's face lit up. "Yes, Mama, I can definitely help you," she said happily. Mama Zik looked relieved and nodded slowly. Olaedo lifted the tray back onto her head. "I'll see you tomorrow," she promised. She waved and started walking away from the house. Mama Zik stood at the gate, watching the girl until she disappeared down the road. But Olaedo hadn't gone very far when someone suddenly stepped out and blocked her path. It was the same young lady who had been waving at her earlier. She stood there with her hands on her hips, staring right at Olaedo. Her face looked very serious. "Do you even know who that old woman is?" she asked sharply. Olaedo blinked. "No," she answered calmly. The girl leaned in closer. "That woman is a witch," she whispered. "Everyone in this village stays away from her house." She pointed back toward the lonely compound. "No one goes there. No one talks to her. You better stay away from her." Olaedo listened quietly, but she didn't look scared at all. Instead, she just gave a small smile. "So?" she asked gently. The girl frowned. "What do you mean, so?" Olaedo adjusted the tray on her head. "I'm not going to stop visiting her just because people think she's a witch." The young lady stared at her, totally shocked. "You don't understand," she said quickly. But Olaedo just shook her head. "She's an old woman living all by herself," Olaedo replied softly. "If she needs help, I'm going to help her." For a few seconds, the girl didn't say a word. Then, she suddenly turned around and walked away as fast as she could. She didn't even look back. Olaedo watched her leave and then continued down the dusty road. But as she walked, she had no idea that something very strange was starting to happen. Back at the lonely house, Mama Zik was still standing by the gate. She stared at the road where Olaedo had disappeared. Slowly, a small smile spread across her wrinkled face. "Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day," she whispered to herself. The next morning, before the sun was even up, Olaedo was already back on the dusty road. The air was cool and quiet. A soft mist covered the bushes, and the birds were just starting to sing. Olaedo carried a small basket in her hand. She walked quickly, feeling happy and cheerful. She remembered how kind the old woman was the day before. The woman looked so lonely, and Olaedo felt good about helping her. Soon, she reached the house at the edge of the village. Mama Zik was already awake. Actually, she had been awake for a long time. She was sitting on a wooden stool in front of her house, staring at the road like she was waiting for someone. When she finally saw Olaedo walking toward her, her face lit up. "My daughter," she called softly. Olaedo smiled and greeted her politely. "Good morning, Mama." "Good morning, my child," the old woman replied. She looked at Olaedo very closely, almost like she was studying her. Then, she reached into her wrapper and pulled out some money. "My daughter," she said gently. "Please help me buy some things at the market." She started listing what she needed. "I need palm oil, vegetables, fish, and some rice." Olaedo listened carefully and nodded. "No problem, Mama," she said happily. Mama Zik put the money in Olaedo's hand. Then she leaned in and said slowly, "Make sure you buy everything." "I will, Mama," Olaedo promised. Without wasting any time, she hurried off toward the village market, which was already getting busy. The market was buzzing. Women were shouting their prices, and buyers moved from stall to stall, looking for the best deals. The air smelled like fresh peppers and roasted corn. Olaedo moved quickly through the crowd. She picked up everything on the list: palm oil, vegetables, fish, and rice. She tucked it all into her basket and headed back to the lonely house. When she arrived, Mama Zik was waiting. Her eyes lit up when she saw the basket. "Ah, you're back already," she said. Olaedo set the basket down and pulled out the items one by one. Mama Zik checked them over. "Very good," she said with a pleased smile. "Very good." Olaedo rolled up her sleeves. "Mama, let me help you cook," she offered. Mama Zik paused for a second, then nodded slowly. "All right, my daughter." They went into the small kitchen behind the house. Olaedo washed the vegetables and cleaned the fish. She started the fire and put the pot on. Soon, the smell of a delicious meal filled the yard. Mama Zik watched her quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes just staring. When the food was ready, they sat down and ate together. Mama Zik ate slowly, enjoying every bite. "This food is so sweet," she said. Olaedo laughed shyly. "I'm just glad you like it, Mama." As the sun began to set, Olaedo got ready to head home. She washed the dishes and wiped her hands. "Mama, I have to go now," she said politely. Mama Zik nodded, but before Olaedo could leave, the old woman walked into her room. A few minutes later, she came back holding something small. It was a beautiful waist bead. The beads were bright and colorful, red, gold, and black, sparkling in the light. "My daughter," Mama Zik said softly, "this is for you." Olaedo's eyes went wide. "For me?" "Yes," the old woman replied. "You helped me today. Think of it as a small thank you gift." Olaedo was so happy, she had never owned anything so pretty. "Thank you, Mama," she said excitedly. She immediately tied the beads around her waist. They fit perfectly. She adjusted her wrapper and smiled. "It's so beautiful." Mama Zik just gave a quiet smile. Olaedo waved goodbye and started the walk home, happily touching her new beads the whole way. When she got home, her mother was outside sorting beans. "Welcome back," her mom said. "Thanks, Mama," Olaedo replied. She went inside to drop off her basket, but she didn't mention the old woman or show her mother the beads. She just kept wearing them. That night, she slept peacefully. The next day, she went about her life as usual, wearing her shiny new beads. But 3 days later, things took a turn. Olaedo suddenly felt very weak. At first, she thought she was just tired, but it got worse. She couldn't stand up for long or go out to sell her goods. Her mother was terrified. "Olaedo, what's wrong?" "I don't know, Mama," Olaedo whispered. Every day, she grew smaller and weaker. Her clothes started hanging off her body. Her mother called the neighbors for help, and they tried everything, but nothing worked. Olaedo's bright face turned pale, and her strong voice became a whisper. One quiet evening, Olaedo took one last slow breath, and then she was gone. The house was filled with the sound of crying. Her mother screamed in heartbreak, "My daughter! My beautiful daughter!" The neighbors were shocked. Olaedo was young and healthy, no one understood how this happened. A few days later, they buried her. Everyone cried as she was lowered into the ground. But nobody knew her secret. She never told anyone about the old woman or the gift. The secret stayed buried with her. That night, the village was silent under a bright moon. Inside her lonely house, Mama Zik stood in the middle of her dark room with the windows shut. Suddenly, a strange mist began to swirl around her body. Mama Zik lifted her head. Her face looked calm, her back straightened, and her tired body suddenly felt strong. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Another year," added. A small smile appeared on her face. Far away, Olaedo was in her grave, but in that lonely house, Mama Zik was stronger than ever. The mist disappeared, and the room went quiet. Mama Zik walked to her door and looked out at the empty road. She was patient. She knew someone else would walk by eventually. And she would be waiting. Always waiting.